Hi everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some people just seem to think faster and accomplish more? Well, this new study dives deep into the connection between how quickly we process information and our overall smarts. And it turns out there's a fascinating reason why, in simple terms, scientists have known for a long time that people who are quicker thinkers tend to be smarter thinkers. This is a super consistent finding, but for ages, no one was quite sure why this happens. It's like knowing that when it rains, the ground gets wet, but not knowing how the water gets there. They had ideas, of course. One big idea was that our working memory, that mental workspace where we hold and play with information, might be the key. Think of working memory like the RAM on a computer. If you have more RAM, your computer can run more programs smoothly at the same time. So the idea was that if you can process information faster, you probably have a better working memory. And that better working memory lets you tackle tougher, more complex problems. This makes a lot of sense, right? Especially when you look at how kids develop. Studies show that as kids get older, their processing speed gets faster first. Then their working memory capacity grows, and only then does their ability to solve complex problems really take off. It's like a chain reaction. But here is where it gets tricky. Working memory isn't just one thing. It's actually made up of different parts. So the researchers in this study wanted to figure out which specific part of working memory is the real link between speed and smarts. They looked at two main contenders. One idea is the executive attention account. This suggests that the ability to focus, ignore distractions, and keep our mind on track basically. Our executive control is what makes working memory powerful and therefore linked to intelligence. Tasks that are hard to do while also holding a lot of information in mind, like complex span tasks where you have to remember things while doing something else, are supposed to measure this. The other idea is the binding account. This says the crucial part of working memory is our ability to link unrelated pieces of information together. Imagine trying to remember where you parked your car and its color. You need to bind the location, parking lot, row C, with the color red. The theory is that if you can form these temporary links, these bindings faster, you can hold more of them at once, and that's what boosts your overall thinking power. So, the big question was which one of these executive attention or binding is the real bridge between processing speed and general intelligence, or G as scientists often call it. To test this, the researchers designed a really neat experiment. They gathered 215 adults and they measured their processing speed in two ways. First, at the brain level, using something called ERPs, or brainwave patterns, looking at how quickly signals traveled. Think of it like measuring the speed of electrical signals in wires. Second, at the behavior level, using something called drift diffusion models. This is a fancy way of measuring how efficiently people gather information before making a decision. Imagine trying to decide if a coin flip is heads or tails. The drift diffusion model looks at how quickly you build up enough evidence to make that call. Scroll processing speed was operationalized separately as cognitive processing speed, drift rates, and neural processing speed, ERP latencies. These two operationalizations were modeled in separate SEMs throughout all analyses. Irregular then, they measured working memory in two ways too, trying to capture those different ideas. For executive attention, they used complex span tasks, like the ones I mentioned, where participants had to juggle remembering items while doing a distracting task. For the binding ability, they used simpler tasks where participants had to remember pairs of things, like a letter and a color, or a word and a number, and then recall which went with which. Scroll working memory capacity was assessed with two types of tasks representing the two theoretical accounts under investigation. Regular, and finally, they gave everyone a big test of general cognitive ability, sort of like an IQ test on steroids, to measure their overall G. Scroll general cognitive ability was assessed with two measures. Regular now, here is where the magic happens, the analysis. They used a statistical technique called structural equation modeling to see how these different measures related to each other, and if working memory acted as that middleman between processing speed and G. Scroll used structural equation modeling to test whether working memory capacity mediated the relationship between processing speed and general cognitive ability. Regular first, they looked at the complex span tasks, which are supposed to measure that executive attention idea. What they found was that yes, complex span tasks did partially explain the link between processing speed and G. So, faster thinkers did better on these tasks, and that helped them score higher on the intelligence tests. But, and this is a big but, the link between speed and G didn't disappear completely. There was still some direct connection left over that complex span wasn't explaining. Scroll complex span performance thus only partially mediated the relationship between processing speed and G. Regular, this suggested that executive attention might be part of the story, but not the whole story, so they moved on to test the binding tasks. And this is where things got really interesting. Scrolldo's relational binding account for the processing speed relationships regular when they looked at the binding task. They found that performance on these tasks fully mediated the relationship between processing speed and general intelligence. That means when you accounted for how well people could bind information, the direct link between how fast they processed things and how smart they were essentially disappeared. Scroll critically, the direct paths from processing speed to G were substantially reduced when binding was included as a mediator. Regular, think about it. Faster processing speed led to better binding ability, and better binding ability led to higher general cognitive ability. Once you factored in the binding ability, the processing speed didn't seem to add anything new to predicting intelligence. This was true for both their brainwave measurements and their behavioral speed measurements. Scroll, when both mediators competed for the prediction of G, binding emerged as the stronger predictor in both models. Is regular to make sure they even ran a model where both complex span, executive attention, and binding were tested at the same time. In this head-to-head competition, binding totally won. It explained the speed. Intelligence link, while the unique part of complex span that wasn't shared with binding didn't contribute anything beyond what binding already explained. Scroll binding emerged as the dominant predictor of general cognitive ability across models of both neural and cognitive processing speed, with complex span contributing effectively 0 unique variants. Regular so. What does this all mean? It means the researchers are leaning heavily towards the binding account. The reason faster thinkers are smarter thinkers isn't just about having better focus or ignoring distractions more efficiently, though that might play a role. The real key seems to be the ability to quickly and effectively link together separate pieces of information. Scroll's finding identifies binding as the working memory component that transmits the association between processing speed and general cognitive ability. Regular, imagine trying to solve a math problem. You need to hold numbers, operations, and potential strategies all in your mind and connect them. If you can bind those elements together more quickly and accurately, you are going to be better at solving that problem. This ability to form and maintain these temporary connections seems to be the crucial bottleneck. When this binding ability is strong due to fast processing, it unlocks higher levels of complex reasoning and problem solving, which is what we call general intelligence. Correlate is not the executive demands of complex span tasks, nor a diffuse attentional control capacity that carries this link, but the more elemental operation of associating disparate pieces of information into coherent relational structures. Regular now, it's important to remember some limitations. This study was cross-sectional, meaning it looked at people at one point in time. So while it shows a strong statistical connection, it can definitively prove that faster processing causes better binding, which then causes higher intelligence. It is possible another factor influences both. Also, the binding tasks, while simpler than complex span, aren't perfectly pure measures of just binding. They still involve other cognitive processes. Scroll first, the cross-sectional design precludes causal inference. Regular scroll, moreover, the nature of binding differs between the two task types. Regular, despite these limitations, the study's findings are compelling. They suggest that the core of what makes us intelligent thinkers might be our ability to weave together disparate bits of information into meaningful wholes, and that this ability is directly powered by how fast our brains can work. Scroll binding, in this view, is the cognitive bottleneck that links processing efficiency to complex reasoning. Regular, this gives us a really clear picture. It's not just about processing speed in itself, but how that speed directly impacts our ability to form mental connections. This has huge implications for understanding intelligence and how it develops. It also opens up avenues for future research. Imagine if we could experimentally speed up binding processes, or if we could find ways to improve our ability to link information. That could have profound effects on how we learn and think. Scroll most pressing is the need to establish the causal direction of the relationship between speed and binding. Regular scroll, a second priority is to determine which sub-process of binding encoding precision, Q binding fidelity, or retrieval is most speed dependent, regular. So, the next time you wonder why some people seem to connect the dots so quickly, remember that it might just be their superpowered mental binder at work. It's a fascinating glimpse into the intricate machinery of the human mind. What do you think about these findings? Do you feel like your ability to connect ideas is a big part of your intelligence? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into the science of thinking, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more mind-bending research, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep those mental binders working.